The desire to be known and to be remembered seems to be a fundamental part of human nature, rooted in our social and cultural evolution. Even in early human societies, people likely sought recognition within their communities, whether through storytelling, rituals, or other forms of social bonding, long before social media existed. As civilization developed, the ways in which people could be known and remembered expanded through written records, monuments, and eventually mass media as we know. And to be known and to be remembered can be linked to several aspects of human evolution and human social behavior. For example, in social bonding sense, early humans lived in close-knit groups where cooperation and social bonds were crucial to their survival. Being recognized and being remembered within a group, for example, would have helped individuals to gain trust and support from others while it was much, much needed. Another aspect is reproductive success. In many species, including humans, individuals who were well known and well respected within their communities often had better opportunities for finding mates in order to reproduce. Another aspect is the cultural transmission, where being remembered allowed individuals to pass on knowledge to their offsprings in terms of their tradition, their cultural practices for future generation, ensuring the survival of their community as a group. And overall, the urge to be known within the human context and to be remembered is likely provided by the evolutionary advantages that contributed to the development of the human society as a whole. The earliest known instances of individuals becoming known in human history often come from ancient civilizations, such as in Egypt. Some of the earliest known individuals who became well known and documented in Egypt were, for example, Narmer, who is considered as one of the first individuals in ancient Egypt, 3100 BCE, that we have some documentations from in terms of him being one of the leaders to be memorized, and there were monuments built on around him. And these early individuals, for example, became known due to their roles in the society, their leadership, and their contribution to the cultural and the human advantages at their point in time. The records of their lives and achievements were often preserved as written text, monuments, and oral traditions. Once we as human species started to develop different ways of communicating one another, different from just the verbal communication, such as in writing, painting, or creating monuments, it really allowed individuals to make a more lasting impact. It made the desire to be remembered much more tangible. Writing, for example, gave people a way to record their thoughts, achievements, and legacies, allowing them to be remembered across generation. So it definitely amplified the way in which we naturally want to be known. The earliest known individual who left a lasting mark in history is often considered to be Narmer from ancient Egypt, and which was, as I mentioned, 3100 BCE. And his name was recorded in stones, in different tablets, and not only just his name, but also his achievements. And even going back before writing, there were likely people who were remembered, but their legacies were not preserved as we know them today, just because they were mainly verbal. Going back to the first ever social media, if you will, person who was documented, Narmer from ancient Egypt, it seems that he himself played a direct role in commissioning the documentations of his achievements. For example, the Narmer palette is very well known, which features detailed depicting his victories and his unification efforts of Egypt. And these were monumental pieces that is believed to be intended for the public display and public communication, reinforcing both his power and his legacy. It is also believed that such works were not just for the ruler's benefit, but were part of a broader effort to consolidate power and ensuring that people recognize his achievements and accomplishments. Egypt, Narmer, in this case himself, took deliberate steps to record his deeds in stone or through various type of arts. This wasn't just a random organic process that happened when people started, for example, talking about him and his achievement, but it was part of a wider strategy to establish his authority, but also making sure that his legacy lived on and that he maintained control and preserved his legacy for future endeavors. As early as Narmer, rulers understood the power of symbols and imagery to conserve and document their legacy, much of the way in which we are doing in the media today, be it in your typical media, in social media, and so forth. But in broader sense back then, documenting rulers was a cultural norm, for example, in this case in ancient Egypt, where the kings and rulers preserved their divine and political achievements by the power of people who, for example, had the knowledge about how to for example, create art or how to write and so forth. The Narmer palette in itself in ancient Egypt was not the beginning of writing by humanity, but rather one of the earliest uses of more formalized writing system to document a specific historical event. The ability to document things in this way was likely already part of an evolving system back then, but during Narmer's time, it became more strategic and more established, if you will, in terms of documenting his legacy. And it begs the question whether this type of documenting one's legacy and the birth of us writing or creating ways in which we as humanity made our legacies sort of much more known and much more lasting than just verbal. It did not just happen, of course, in ancient Egypt. It happened around the world. However, in ancient Egypt, that's when it started happening, and then the rest of the world, after a few decades afterwards, they also started documenting. So in this case, while Narmer's time marked a significant shift in the human civilization in terms of us recording ourselves, our legacy, and making sure that we are remembered, the same type of records, for example, in terms of writing and building governance and so forth, happened in other parts of the world, in other parts of regions of the world. And but with different timelines, of course. In essence, the shift to a more centralized and literate and complex societies was happening at a different paces in different ways around the world, with ancient Egypt being one of the first one that we have documentations from. It seems that our innate quest to be more or less obsessed with having a legacy, however you want to define it. Some people see their legacies as creating babies, and others see the legacies as documenting their work, whatever they're doing. Nonetheless, it appears to be something innate that has been within us even way before civilization, even way before we learned how to write or create different ways of documenting things, essentially. And it seems to have a lot to do with our evolution and also our need and the genetic quest we have in terms of being immortal and continue with creating the next generation, and being competitive in terms of the landscape of being able to reproduce, so to speak. And so while it started before the civilization as we know it, in terms of our survival mechanisms, now it has gradually translated the same core quest into how we have built the society as it is today, much of which is still for us to have this innate quest to be seen, to be known, and to reproduce. Some people say that, no, I don't like to be seen. I'm not talking about being famous and being seen like that. I don't mean it that way. But I'm thinking about at its core, at its genetic core, in terms of evolution and us just being another species in the world, but with the much more evolved brain, which has made us to create the society as it is today, and much of which it has also fed into the way we have created the world in terms of media, social media, and everything else that we're seeing. And it's all an ramification and a continuous of the way in which we are still wanting to essentially be known, be seen, and continue with our legacy and reproduce in the world, however that translates in and much of these evolution that we're seeing in us that we do not see in other species, let's say animals, is because of the way in which our brains have evolved. So let's say if sharks were also to evolve, if their brain had evolved the way our brains have evolved, they would probably, going through the same route, because at its core, although our brain is evolved right now to its complexity as it is today, at its core, it's still all about survival and reproduction. It's still a very basic animalistic way, but now for us, it translates into how we have built our society and our surroundings, which is, for example, our legacy is important the way it manifests today, for example. And that is how, for example, one of the manifestation is the way in which we see the social media has evolved, the way our media has evolved, the way we're building things. But at its core, we're still acting at a very, very basic level, which has to do with survival and reproduction. But again, because our brain has evolved to such an extent, we are now in a position to not only just act based upon just the primitive of survival, but act on a survival that is much, much more sophisticated. Hence, we have built societies and technology and you name it. Okay, that's all I had for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.